I always loved the idea of having nothing and from nothing creating something, right? I mean, it is such a rush, right? Whether that's music, whether it's film, whether it's business. I mean, it's just really essentially an idea that somebody gives birth to. And with certain luck, hard work, connecting the dots, and a lot of different things, these ideas come to life.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl, Kate, here, and I am so excited to be back here for another week with another inspiring story for you. On this week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, we welcome the amazing Jenny Feterovich, Emmy-nominated producer, DJ, female founder, and truly a woman of many talents and world-changing abilities. Jenny arrived in the U.S. with a suitcase and only $100 to her name. Her family fled their native Russia and landed in Detroit in 1989, and she immediately jumped into small business. Jenny is now an award-winning TV and film producer known for the hit TV show Startup and the award-winning feature-length documentary The Russian Five. Jenny is the executive producer of Muse production house and co-founder of Parliament Studios. She's a lifelong entrepreneur and small business advocate, focusing on empowering women and immigrants in business. Jenny has also made a name for herself in the music world as the globetrotting DJ Jenny LaFemme and co-creator of Girls Gone Vinyl, an organization that highlights and advances women in electronic music. Jenny has created several corporations, worked with several Fortune 500 companies, and she volunteers with multiple nonprofit organizations around the world. Everything from Habitat for Humanity, Godmothers Detroit, Love Without Borders, Real Help for Ukraine, and so much more. Jenny is a force to be reckoned with, a true beacon of light with a powerful story. You do not want to miss this incredible episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Jenny. Jenny, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here. This has been a long time in the making.
It's been such a long time in the making, and there's so much that I want to talk to you about. And it's like, I don't even know how we're going to do it in an hour. You're such a woman. You're a woman of many talents, and you have so many things going on in your life, in your daily life, also in your career. And so I want to try and hit all the different things. But before we get into that, I would love to rewind and hear a little bit about your own story. I know that your family immigrated from Russia and you have a really powerful story, but can you talk about your early life? What was it like growing up in Russia? And then what led to the move, and how did you end up in Detroit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up, it wasn't even Russia back then, it was Soviet Union. It was a very closed off country and society. The goal of the government was to make everybody believe that communism is the best thing in the world, which it really wasn't, as we got to know later. But when you lived in a closed society, what you don't know, you don't know. So I grew up with all the things that I do and love now. All of those things were very much restricted by the government, right? You couldn't have a business. Music and film were controlled. You could only have things that were approved by the government committees or things that were made in Russia. Lots of propaganda pieces. Once in a while, you'd get things coming out of Eastern Europe, or Indian films were very popular, right? Because they were non-threatening. They were typically about love and romance, somebody from the wrong side of the street, or he gets married to a girl or a guy and they dance, So that was very much permitted. So imagine growing up in a place like that. Not only that, in the 80s. I mean, imagine getting in line to stand in line for something you didn't even know what you were going to get at the store. But you needed it, whatever that was. There was a lot of scarcity, scarcity of food, scarcity of things, but still, it was a nice childhood. I had a lot of friends, I just did all the regular child things that I was doing, but the one thing that was different about our family and other families that I came to America with, we were Jewish. Which is interesting because all religion was against the law. So we were not Jewish. We didn't even know what the religion part of that was, but we were Jewish rather by nationality, and Jewish people were highly discriminated against. And I mean, highly, it was institutionalized to the point where my parents would tell me, hey, like, we shouldn't talk about this. We should try to hide this fact as much as possible. And one day, American Jews found out that this was happening in the Soviet Union. They started finding that out in the 70s. And in the 80s, they marched on Washington. There was about 400,000 people, and they asked President Reagan to make a deal with Gorbachev to let my people go, and that started what was known as Operation Exodus, that led to almost 2 million Jewish people leaving the Soviet Union to various places. Some went to Israel, some went to Australia, Canada. We were going to the United States. So, in June of 1989, we left the Soviet Union with $100 and 6 suitcases, got on a plane to Austria, then got on a train to Italy, waited our turn, and on October 24th, 1989, I arrived in Detroit, Michigan, to my disappointment at the time. Not now. I love Detroit now, but back then it was definitely quite a culture shock coming out of Moscow, which by its size and its vibrancy was probably equivalent to New York. Still is. So
Yeah, Detroit's come so far, and now even with the art culture, all the culture, music, all the different things that are going on in Detroit. And we had that back then, but it was so different back in the 80s. And so I'm sure that was such just a culture shock in a way. But your story,
yeah, everything. Everything was a culture shock.
Totally.
Food, people, the language. I mean, we didn't speak any English. Like everything was a culture shock.
Yeah. So your story really is the American dream, because here you shared that you showed up with your suitcases, $100, and then right away, as I know your story, or as I know from you, is that you right away jumped into being an entrepreneur, and you started as a young person. Can you talk about that, your first entrepreneur efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it took a little bit time of adjustment, but a couple of years later, I always loved the idea of having nothing and from nothing creating something, right? I mean, it is such a rush, right? Whether that's music, whether it's film, whether it's business. I mean, it's just really essentially an idea that somebody gives birth to. And with certain luck, hard work, connecting the dots, and a lot of different things, these ideas come to life, right? And it becomes a part of our everyday life. Like imagine somebody sitting there right now writing a song that will eventually be a huge hit, right? Somebody is in that dream constantly. So yeah, my first venture was is a complete failure, and I've had many of those. It was a little resale shop in Hamtramck, Michigan. And I knew nothing about business, frankly, but I really wanted to do it. So I borrowed what seemed like $1 million at that time from my mother, which was only about $10,000, but we didn't have much. And I went on this adventure of opening my first business, and it just, everything about it was so wrong.
But it's so good, like you mentioned, it's so good to fail. And I think that that's such an important thing for entrepreneurs to talk about is we need to be open to failure and learn from it and grow from it. And those things just make us stronger and I think make us better business people.
1000%. If you haven't failed, I don't know what you're doing. It's right. You're constantly playing it safe, and there's zero growth in that, zero adventure in that. So now I just try to fail as fast as possible at things that I tried that are new, so I could learn as fast as possible.
Yeah, well, I know you've learned and you've grown, and there are so many different things that we can talk about, but I want to talk about music for a second because there's so much to unpack there. You always had a love for music, and you became a globetrotting DJ Jenny LaFemme, and you're co-founder of Girls Gone Vinyl, an organization that highlights and advances women in electronic music. Talk to me about how you became a DJ, first of all, and then how did Girls Gone Vinyl come to be? And tell me a little bit about your work with that organization.
Yeah, so how I became a DJ was very interesting. When we got to America, we lived in this little shitty basement apartment in Oak Park, Michigan. I didn't even have a bed. I had a couch. We didn't have much. But what I did have is a television with many channels, because in the Soviet Union, we only had I call it 2.5, there was 3. Very limited content that we could consume. Coming to America, there was all kinds of content I could consume. One night, I remember that clearly sitting on that couch, I came across a TV show called The New Dance Show. You're welcome. You should definitely YouTube this, everybody. And it was a poor man's Detroit version of the Soul Train that took place in somebody's basement. But these people played the coolest music. They had the best outfits. I'm like, these are my people, right? Which was weird. They looked nothing like me. At that point, I felt like, I don't know, I got to find these people. So one day I found these people at this after hours nightclub on 7 Mile called Club Heaven. Literally, these were the people. And I fell in love with house music, just fell in love with the culture, with the warmth of it, with the way it made people feel, just the community that was there. And at that time, I was with my quote unquote people, the Russian Jewish immigrants. I went to a party and it was horrible. So I told everybody I've been to really good parties now. And people don't assimilate fast enough a lot of times. So a lot of my friends have never been to a party like that. I was probably the only one has ever seen anything like that. So I said, I'm going to throw my own party. And everybody's like, who's going to DJ? And I said, I've seen how other people do it. So I'll figure it out. And I rented some equipment, and I still remember this. It was Christmas Eve, so I'll be celebrating my DJ anniversary this Sunday. I had built an audience with Jewish people because we had nothing to do on Christmas. I rented a synagogue. I've never DJed a day in my life, and 300 people showed up standing in front of me. Luckily, people who rented me equipment, shout out to Chuck and Ross, amazing guys. They said, listen, don't worry about it, right? Like, just play music. If you have good taste in music, the skills will come. And I'm grateful to them for not talking me out of this, right? Because a lot of people spend so much time in the basement kind of perfecting the skill, and me not knowing what I know now, I just went for it. And that's how I became a DJ, literally.
That's amazing though. But I think that story is so important too, Jenny, because we oftentimes talk ourselves out of things. Like, I'm not good enough. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what I'm doing. Every single day, I feel like I have those conversations with myself, but just to throw yourself into it, sometimes you just have to put one foot in front of the other, or just jump right in like you did on Christmas Eve and just figure it out. And you figured it out.
Yeah, listen, that's why not, right? I live in the power of why not. I live in a world where, I'll figure it out type of thing. Because at the end of the day, everybody you see puts on their pants the same day, same morning, the same way as you do, one leg at a time. They have figured it out, right? People are smart. You can figure it out if you've got common sense, especially nowadays. When I became a DJ, it was very hard in the essence. There wasn't really no internet, right? So I couldn't go like, how do I become a DJ? How do I beat match? How do I do all these things, right? So I had to find people that will teach me. That it was extremely hard. Not just that, the barrier of entry into the business was also much higher. Now you've got a laptop, you can download a song for 99 cents. Back then, if you wanted to get a DJ rig, it was $4,000 or $5,000, and each record that you would play one or two songs from would cost $10. So in order for you to show up, you really had to be in it, right? Like, it wasn't like a side hobby that you could just have, because it was a huge investment. But after becoming a DJ, for a certain period of time and playing and becoming famous and traveling the world, my co-founder Maggie Durtha came to me one day and she said, "Hey, I'm noticing there's not a lot of women playing at this major music festival that happens in Detroit. I've been throwing these parties to give people to give women space to play. Will you join me?" To which I said, "You know what? The party is great and we can do that." I said, however, I had now started a production company. I said, the bigger story here, why don't we go around the world and talk to these women and make this into a project, which was very ambitious because I have never done that before either, but I thought I'd figure it out. And that's how Girls Gone Vinyl got kicked off, because every day that I would play, I would literally hear for years, "You're pretty good for a girl." I started talking to other women. "You're pretty good for a girl." I would be at this massive gigs and guys would come up to me and they're like, "Wow, I didn't know women can mix records like that." As if we're doing it with some female parts, versus we're just people who are doing the same thing as you are, right? And probably actually better than most of you at that point. And that's when we did a Kickstarter, very successful one. And we started traveling the world and talking to women around the world about their experience in the world of electronic music.
It must be so cool for you to think back to those early days when you were just getting into music and there were a few female DJs, and now to see these incredible female DJs on main stages at festivals, and it just has grown and evolved, seeing women out there making music. I think it's incredible.
Absolutely. And, we had a lot to do with that. We started a lot of viral conversations, were covered on Billboard, Huffington Post, all over the place. And they did start getting more and more into the festivals. I mean, the problem now is still we don't see that many women headlining, right? So that very last spot, it's still hard to see a woman be up there, right? And the percentages are just not there yet. But again, we continue to kind of promote that and have these conversations and create new young ambassadors in the business and to mentor new women who are getting into the business.
What can we do, or people who are listening, what can we do to support young female DJs or female DJs of any age? It doesn't have to be young female DJs, but what can we do to support women in music?
Just go see them, tell them that they're great, just encourage them, right? I mean, I think it's all about encouragement. Listen to people's mixes online, right? There's SoundCloud, just give people props. Sometimes it takes one person to change the whole entire course of your existence.
Yeah, there's so much that we can do. And even social media is such a great outlet for us to show support. We talk a lot about nonprofit organizations on this podcast. So obviously people can follow different nonprofit organizations, but I always say, like, even with female DJs, if you just Google it and see who's on Instagram and follow them and share their work, I think it's so incredible, the gift that we have with social media to spread awareness and support one another.
100%. It doesn't cost anything, right? Like just genuinely supporting that. And for people who are in the business, you're standing on somebody else's shoulders. So make sure that you allow people to stand on yours, right? Like mentor women, give them your time, because once you were there. So I'm really big on that. I always welcome any sort of conversation or an idea. So I always love that.
Yeah, you're so great about that, Jenny, and you're just such a beacon of light. And I'm so grateful to be spending this time with you and just to get to share your story. And I hope that everyone who's listening, they take that to heart and say, what can I do to support other women or just other individuals? It's not just about supporting women, but we're so much stronger together when we stand together. And you're a great example of that.
If you want to be a part of the revolution and support the work we're doing to uplift women's voices and their stories, please consider donating to our 501c3 nonprofit organization. Every dollar goes right back into the work that we're doing and will allow us to tell even more stories of inspiring women and girls to inspire and empower the next generation. Donate today at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.
There are so many different career highlights that we could talk about, but one of the highlights, I think, of your career that really kind of caught my attention for the first time when I was reading about you and learning about you online is that you were one of the producers of the award-winning feature-length documentary, The Russian Five. How did you get involved in that film? And for those who don't know the story, can you share a little bit about the incredible story of The Russian Five?
Yeah, absolutely. So the story of the Russian Five is, you would think it's a hockey story, because Russian Five was a first all Russian hockey unit that played in the NHL specifically for the Detroit Red Wings, that would end up bringing the Stanley Cup to Detroit for the first time after a 42-year drought, and we're called the Hockey Town. In my opinion, they also changed the way that hockey is played in North America, right? Because they brought in a different style. But it's really not about that, right? We made a hockey movie not about hockey. It's a human story because something very tragic happens to one of the players. It's about brotherhood, and it's about the fact that it doesn't matter where you come from. When you're a team, you're a team. So how I got involved with that, I actually knew the guys because we came to America, most of us at the same time. And even though they were like big stars to somebody, every Sunday and every Wednesday, we played soccer in Oak Park, in this random park, and we would always laugh. They'd drive up in their Corvettes and their fancy cars. I had 1979 Pontiac Bonneville. I was also the only girl playing with this grown man and this huge hockey star. So we were friends, but that's not how this story even came to me, how I even thought about that story. In my opinion, it's one of the greatest sports stories that ever lived. Few years ago, a young director, Joshua Reel, came to me. Somebody asked me for a favor, and I took a meeting with him. And he had been trying to make this film for years. I was his last stop. He came into my office, I promised I won't take on another project that morning. And then he said, I want to make the story of the Russian Five. I was like, wow, how has that story not been told? So it's incredibly difficult to finance documentaries independently. So I told him, I'll go to one person only. If he gives us the money it's meant to be, we're going to do this film, which is what I did. I went to Daniel Milstein, Hohn's Gold Star mortgage at that time. Now he is a major sports agent along with his mortgage business. At that time, he only had one client, Pavel Datsuk, because they were friends. Now he's a massive, massive agent, one of the biggest in the world. And I pitched in and I said, if me and you don't tell the story dies. Like, will you come on this journey with me? And he agreed. So it was a 5 years in the making. What people don't realize when they see something for 90 minutes, that it took a lot of people many, many years to bring that story to life. We traveled the world. And one of the best things we did, we actually took post-production editing outside of Detroit. And we took it to Texas when nobody knew the Red Wings or the Russian Five. And they had helped us create the movie that it really is, that became a huge success and that was seen all over the world and was the box office top grossing documentary in 2019.
Yeah, it's such an incredible story and such an incredible documentary. So I'll be sure to put all the details for that in the show notes so people can easily watch it. I just encourage everyone to follow it. And it's the power of storytelling, Jenny. And I know you are such an incredible storyteller, but sometimes there are instances like that where if we don't tell the story, no one else will. And so I'm so grateful that you and everyone else who is involved in it shared that story. And it's so powerful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's transition over. So many things that I want to talk to you about, but let's talk about startup, because that's another thing. Now we're transitioning into television. You know, you've done film and documentaries, you've done music, and now you do so much with TV, and there's so much other stuff that we can talk about. But how did the concept for startup start? Was there a spark moment?
So the concept was startup. So the way I got into even television and film, Michigan had incentives coming into town, which I think was 2011, 2010, something like that. So there was a big announcement around the fact that incentives were coming to Michigan. And a friend of mine had called me and he said, hey, this seems very exciting. Do you want to open a business around the film industry? And I was getting very tired of touring and really trying to make money as a DJ, right? You're always working for your money is not working for you. And at some point, every party becomes a party, right? It just is. It doesn't matter where you are. It loses some of the joy, which I now have back in music because I play once a month, sometimes twice. I play for fun. So it's not something that I have to do, to make a living. So there was a perfect timing. So I said, okay, yeah, let's do that. So the first company I actually opened was called Filming in Detroit. And it was providing extras, automobiles, and locations to the production companies that were here filming. Quickly, I realized it's not something I wanted to do. I was very low at the totem pole of Hollywood. And, it's a very tricky place to be. So I just shifted and I pivoted and opened a production company called Parliament Studios. Just like many other production companies, you start doing commercials, music videos, it's a very typical journey of a production company. So one day, somebody I knew from techno, actually, Gary Brado, he made a documentary about techno called High Tech Soul. He came to my office and he said, I have this general idea about doing a show about entrepreneurship. We could do a Michigan only PBS show because I know somebody who's got a show on PBS that's similar that can help us figure out how to get it on the air. So once again, you see how I roll. I said, sure, why not? Neither me and him have never made a television show before, which was an interesting journey. Every time I watch season 1 now, I just shake my head. And even season 2, I was like, wow, that was so bad. But you know what you know, and you've got the best resources that you could possibly have. So we picked up cameras, invited some friends, and we made a pilot that we took to our local PBS station. So they said, wow, this is really good. We want to take you guys regionally. So we got in a car with my Scion back then, XB. We drove to Chicago, shot another pilot, came back with a regional pilot. They said, wow, this is really great. We're going to take you guys nationally. So we're like celebrating, got a national TV show. And then they dropped on us that we have to go and find the money to do the show, which was a very unexpected plot twist. So now, just like any other business owner, we have a great proof of concept. We have an idea that we know is going to work. but now we need an exuberant amount of money to make a 13-part series for a national TV show. Fast forward 11 years later, 11 seasons under our belt, going into season 12. I just landed from our 4th Emmy nomination. Somehow we figured it out and made it work all this time.
Yeah, but it's so incredible. And I love that story of this kind of spark moment of like, oh, this is an idea, this is a concept, what are we going to do? And then all the different red tape or things that you had to overcome in order to bring it to fruition. And I'm sure that you turn around and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going into season 12. Your mind kind of gets blown thinking about all the different years, all the different stories too that you've been able to tell through this. And it's kind of back to the Russian Five. If you're not telling the story, who else is, you know?
Absolutely. And it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories. We pride ourselves being one of the best business television shows because we're extremely authentic, right? There's nothing scripted, unlike some other shows that are there. Again, nothing against some amazing shows that are there talking about entrepreneurship. But when you dig deep, for instance, a lot of them don't pass due diligence. They never get the deals, right? It's contrived. Where we show up, and you as a business owner, if you end up on the show, and I cast the show still to this day selfishly because I love the stories of entrepreneurs. And at this point, I've probably talked to almost 1,000 people in depth about their story. Why, how, what, when, where, what kept them going, what made them successful. And I know a lot of failures that had happened of people that have been on a show. So for us to make that impact and to show people that anything is possible, because I really, truly believe that anything is possible. The impact of our show just continues to be huge on the landscape of entrepreneurship.
Even if you read online, I was reading some of the comments from different people, and they talked about startup being the reason why they decided to chase their dream or why they decided to start their business, because they saw a story and they said, oh, if so-and-so can do it, so can I. And that's the power of storytelling, but that's also the power of startup, that you're not only telling these stories, but you're also encouraging other people around the world to chase their dreams. If they see a need or they have an idea for a business or see a need for a business or a nonprofit organization, that they do it. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and that was our mission was always to inspire and educate. That's why we remained on PBS, even though we've been lured into other stations, right? We never wanted to lose that integrity on being a #1 public trust station. And, probably one of my favorite stories from the realm that you were saying to me is we had a company, I think it was 2 years ago, no, last year, called ConnectCon. And our show is actually shown in prisons, education systems, we're in schools, but we're big in a prison system. And if you think about people who are in a prison system, a lot of times when they get out, one of the few options they have is entrepreneurship. And there was a guy that watched our show while he was in jail. When he got out, he started this company called ConConnect, which then helps now this like a LinkedIn for returning citizens, where he connected resources. And we actually did not know that. He didn't even tell me in casting, but he told Gary in the interview when they were sitting down, said the reason why I'm here is because I watched your show in prison.
Yeah, that's such an important thing to talk about. We've done a documentary, we've done a series on incarceration and just having conversations about the struggles that people face getting out of jail and prison, and how a lot of times they end up right back in jail and prison because there aren't opportunities. And that's the power of entrepreneurship, that they can start something, and sometimes even it's starting a small or little business, and then it can grow and evolve and just become life-changing for them.
Absolutely.
You shared the one story, but is there another story or two that really kind of sparked something in you, or that you were really touched by?
Well, I mean, there's tons always, and the last season was really epic. We opened with Baobab Fair, and they're both refugees out of Burundi. And they were going through this refugee process. They were in the camps. They were escaping some bad regime, and they wouldn't let the husband out. So the wife ended up coming to Detroit, and she was pregnant with twins. She found out when she got here. And thank God for organizations like the Freedom House that housed her while she was waiting for her husband. And he came here and he already saw his children after they were born. And they started an amazing restaurant business. And Mamba, the guy who started this, and his wife, Nadia, have an amazing business. They're such an inspiration, And Mamba, I think last year, won Chopped, cooking with an ingredient he's never touched in his life, which was a scallop. So that was an interesting twist. But one of the best, probably, that blows my mind is: are you familiar with the new pickleball place that just opened in Ann Arbor, Michigan?
No,
Wolverine
tell me about
Pickleball.
that.
Oh my God! So you know how pickleball is all the craze now, right? Like people are loving the pickleball vibe. So I met this woman, Christy, who told me about this incredible story, right? So there are two moms. They send their kids to college. It's a second kind of act in their life, right? So they're like, what are we gonna do? The kids are gone to college. We've had some lifestyle businesses before. They're like, this pickleball thing is fun. So they started a pickleball league with $200. Then COVID hit. So throughout COVID, they kind of grow and this becomes a huge community. So 2 weeks ago, they opened a $7 million facility. This is in less than 3 years. $7 million facility, which is considered one of the top 20 in the world. And it was financed by 20 women from their community that gave them $100,000 each. For then they leveraged that into an SBA loan. And 2 weeks ago, they opened their doors for this immaculate, humongous. Think about this, right? Like you're sitting there talking about girl revolution, right? You're like, sent my kids to college. I've dedicated this whole time to me being a mother. All the moms out there, I'm sure, can relate. I have 3 children, right? I live this every day. And you're like, what am I going to do now? And 3 years later, you're opening one of the top in the world pickleball facilities.
My mind is blown by so many parts of that story, but that's absolutely incredible. And I did see that story on your website, and I will be sure to put the link in the show notes so people can check out all these different stories. But what an incredible story. And also it goes back to supporting your sisters. Like that's incredible that they went to different women in the community and got their support and then were able to just grow it to where it is now. That's incredible.
Isn't that amazing? Like, let's go to they've built such an incredible community. Think about building a community. And when I say anything is possible, literally anything is possible. You start a league with $200. You build such an incredible community where 20 women feel so comfortable and they have such a belief in what you're doing that they all write you a check, each one for $100,000 for you to open your dream business.
Anything is possible. And also community is so important. We know that in this day and age, especially, going through COVID and then getting back out into the world, I think we need places for community and to build community, and especially for women to build community amongst women. And so they're doing that. And I can't wait to go check it out in Ann Arbor. That's incredible. Let's talk about EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. How did you get involved in EO, and tell me about the great work that EO does?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a global peer-to-peer entrepreneur network. Probably one of the best decisions of my life I ever made. I wish I would have made that decision earlier, actually. And I kept hearing about EO from a friend of mine that I've known. Like we came to America together. He was talking about this. I was like, I don't know. I don't have time. As business owners, we're always like, I don't have time. I got to work on my business, right? I'm doing all these things and I'm growing, right? So it was very dismissive. But I clearly remember as I started traveling season 3 and season 4 of my show, I would see these people that would all say the same thing. If it wasn't for me joining AO, I would still be standing at the front desk of my X, Y, and Z. And because I did, I've now massively scaled. So when I heard that several times, I was like, you know what, there's something here. So I got to go check out this EO organization. And boy, am I glad I did. It's a global organization, about 18,000 people. We operate on some really great core values, which is trust and respect, together with growth, thirst for learning, and being bold. And it's not a networking group. We don't sell anything to each other. It's a pure peer support group for entrepreneurs. And we do that on the pillars of personal, business, family, and community. And it's all about growth, right? And I always ask people now that tell me they're too busy, I'm like, when was the last time you invested in yourself? Like literally in yourself, because it's so much more than it's your business, right? In a business sense, it will teach you how to stop working in your business and work on your business. So it will allow you to grow, and we do a lot of we do a lot of global events, regional events, we do learning events, we do social events. Detroit's got a super vibrant chapter. I was the president of that chapter last year. I was also a co-chair of an event called Eccentric, where I got to bring 500 people from around the globe to Detroit with some incredible speakers on stage to kind of showcase what Detroit entrepreneurship has to offer. We also have an accelerator program that helps people scale, right? So the qualifications for EO itself, you have to have $1 million in sales and then go through an interview process. But if you have 250, we'll bring you into an accelerator program and we'll help you scale to $1 million as much as possible. So for me, it's been a game changer. It made me a better mother, better human being, a better businesswoman, just across the board, better everything.
Yeah, just that support system where it can be very isolating and lonely being an entrepreneur. And you could say that it just is lonely sometimes in the world, but building that community of people that can say, hey, Jenny, I've been there. Maybe you should try this, or maybe you should do this, or what can I do? Can I introduce you to somebody? And that's what I've seen with EO. It's just such a welcoming, incredible community that supports people. It's amazing.
100%. And I love that community, and we do so much giving back. You know, I'm particularly very interested in having more and more women in this organization, which I've been working hard on. You know, when I joined, I think there was maybe 4 or 5 of us in this chapter. I think we're approaching almost 30 now. So I've been doing a lot of work to make sure that there's a lot of women that are present in that space, since, you know, in the last few years, more women have opened businesses than actually men have.
Well, in Detroit, you see so many women-owned businesses and women-run nonprofit organizations. I mean, there's just so much going on in Detroit for women, and women are really the beacons of light to the world, women of Detroit. So it's incredible that you're bringing more women into that. And I know through EO and through all your work, the different things that you've done, you do so much to empower women and immigrants in particular through all the different things that you do. And you're also involved in multiple nonprofit organizations, everything from Habitat for Humanity to Godmothers Detroit. But I want to talk to you about Love Without Borders and Real Help for Ukraine. How did these efforts start? And talk to me about the great work that you're doing with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, they started out of need. It's not something that I was planning on doing. You know, I've got plenty of things happening in my life at any given day. But on February 24th, when the war started, I mean, my wife is from Ukraine. We have friends, we have family, where we were deeply saddened and disturbed by that. And as the war unfolded fairly quickly, it was very apparent that nobody was willing to go into the war zone, be inside the country, which happens quite a bit, unfortunately. So the only people that were on the ground there was World Central Kitchen. I don't know if you're familiar with that nonprofit from Jose Andres. By the way, shout out, they just won the Emmy. They were at my table at the Emmys, and it couldn't have happened to the better people, because I think the work that they do around the globe, at every hot zone, at every disaster, they're giving people food and they're feeding them in a very dignified way, which I love everything about that. So as we saw that there wasn't really a lot of logistics and the organizations were not going in, we started saying, what can we do? And we created a grassroots organization called Real Help for Ukraine. And people started giving me money. They said, I don't know what you're going to do with it, but I know you're going to do something great with it. And that's how much trust people had in me. And we started supporting real, true grassroots effort, whether it was moving orphanages outside of the country, whether it was one guy in the city of Kherson when it was under siege. He was a baker. We completely supported his bread operation, where he would just give bread for free to people, or feeding people in Kharkov, medical supplies. I mean, you name it. And we just got in. So everything that was happening inside of the country within our grassroots efforts, that's what we have been doing. We're still continuing to do some of that work. You know, the war is still ongoing, but at least there's a lot more help now. There's a lot more resources. You know, so we're definitely continue to be involved the same way as we will be involved in some other humanitarian crises as they arise.
It's so sad because we don't see it all the time on the news. And so people kind of have a short attention span and they're like, oh, everything's fine because I'm not hearing about it every single day. But like you said, the war is still ongoing. There's so much that we can all do just to raise awareness and support organizations like Real Help for Ukraine. What can people do to support the ongoing efforts with Real Help for Ukraine?
Yeah, we have a website, Real Help for Ukraine. Drop us a donation if you want to. If you are in your city and you see these refugees that end up here, give them some words and see if you can help them somehow. All these people come here, they're all hard workers, they're looking for jobs, things of that nature. And otherwise, I'm always a big fan, please support World Central Kitchen, just support some of these grassroots organizations that are not so top heavy, that are actually on the ground doing the real work.
Yeah, World Central Kitchen is incredible. And I just feel like they show up whenever people need them the most and really set the stage for all of us to do more. Whenever I see anything about what they're doing, I'm like, oh, what am I doing? I can do more. We all can do something to support other people and support people in need and be a part of these crises around the world. There's so much hurt and so many difficulties around the world, and we can all do something.
Watch In Tandem on One Girl Revolution's website or on our YouTube page. In Tandem is the inspiring story of Caitlin Cullen and her restaurant in Milwaukee, The Tandem. The Tandem does more than just serve food. The Tandem is a family, a community of support for everyone. The Tandem hires people that often no one else will hire, gives them an opportunity, trains them, and helps them find their way in this world. The Tandem is a support system for everyone who walks through their doors. But when COVID hit in March 2020, the Tandem story became even more inspiring. The Tandem closed their doors to customers and began solely feeding people in need during a time when so many people were struggling. Caitlin and the Tandem community fed over 115,000 people during the first year of the pandemic. Absolutely incredible. Watch and share In Tandem today on our website at onegirlrevolution.com.
Jenny, I want to ask you a personal question because I've heard so much about your life and everything about your life is so inspiring to me, and everything that you do is so inspiring. I'm curious if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do every single day, why you're so passionate about storytelling and why you're so passionate about empowering women and immigrants. I know that the immigrant story is your own, so it's probably a little bit personal for you. Probably is very personal actually for you. And helping others that you do every single day. What would that root be if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do?
I think it became my mission in life. I figured out what my purpose is. I think one of the hardest things in the world is to figure out what your purpose is, right? We could be good at many different things. We could enjoy many different things, but I always talk to people about what their sole purpose is. And one day, honestly, it just came to me. I was in Tulum with my energy healer and trying to heal some personal things that were happening in my life, an unsuccessful pregnancy, actually. A lot of women can relate to that. And I was almost like at this bottom, which is rare for me, right? Because I'm always an incredibly cheerful person. I'm a person that can always figure everything out. But there's some things that you'll face in life that you just can't figure out. They're just beyond you, right? And for me, it was getting pregnant. I met somebody that I dearly fell in love with later in life, and it was a journey. It's something that not a lot of people talk about, right? We could look young, we could be successful, right? But there's just some things that we can't control. So I was in Tulum, I remember that, and I was sort of like at this bottom, and I wasn't feeling great, and I accidentally found this energy healer that I still go see. We don't talk, it's really an energy exchange, it's very strange. And it wasn't on that trip, but I was in a later trip where I was laying there and he was doing energy work. And it came to me, my mission in life is to help people become better versions of themselves through storytelling. And I could see how stories could impact and change people, right? Because people are in their heads, they're in their minds, or they haven't traveled places, they haven't seen life in a certain way. And for me, if I could tell a story and you can walk in somebody else's shoes, and that produces empathy, compassion, whatever the subject matter is, and it touches you, and you will help one person, or one thing about you will change and you'll become better by 1%, I've accomplished my mission. So I'm solely driven by that because, again, I believe anything is possible. And when people watch me speak and then they reach out to me and I have these conversations with them, I mean, it could be as easily as I just believe in them, and then they start believing in themselves. And it's a beautiful thing then when they write to me and they're like, I did it. This is what I did. And it's amazing.
Thank you for sharing just about the difficulties in life too, because sometimes we see somebody, like you said, see somebody speak or hear a podcast episode like this, and we're like, oh, Jenny has it all figured out. Like she's done it. Everything is perfect. She's happy all the time. But we all have those struggles in life. And I think that struggles a lot of times can make us stronger. I don't want to sugarcoat it. A lot of times it's like a wound that we carry for the rest of our life, a scar that we carry for the rest of our lives. But us sharing those stories can often give other people the power or the courage to share their own stories. And like you shared, I think that women, we need to share our stories more than anything, because there are other women out there that may be struggling with something or maybe excited about something, and we can have the power to really uplift them and support our sisters.
1000%. Or they could see that, like you said, right? A lot of people go like, oh my God, like she has it all. But listen, everybody's got moments. Everybody just deals with these moments differently. I mean, beneath of it all, everything is never perfect, and that's okay. Everything is not supposed to be perfect, right? Life is a journey, and you've got ups and you've got downs, and you wouldn't have the ups without the downs. So
Jenny, where do you go from here? I don't have a crystal ball. I can't guess. I'm sure that there are so many things that have happened in your life. Emmy nominations are one of them that you probably never fathomed in your life that you would achieve. But where do you go from here? And what are some things that you're working on? I know the 12th season of Startup, but what else do you have going on?
Yeah, 12th season of Startup. We're trying to lift a couple other shows that we're developing. So always there's that type of content. But I am really fascinated about all the latest technologies that are emerging, which is the immersive technologies specifically. I've got some really great friends that've created some immersive shows. So I believe the future of entertainment is in immersive entertainment. So I'm heading in that direction. Again, it's storytelling and creating experiences just in a different way, right? Like look at what's happening at the Sphere, for instance, in Las Vegas, right? Such an amazing way to see something now, right? You're immersed in this content. So I'm excited about that, but I'm always open. I don't know who's gonna walk in through the door and offer me some crazy thing to do. So I'm excited about speaking more. I'm gonna be working on a book / maybe a journal, or both of them together in this upcoming year. I'm still trying to figure out, how do I take this inspiration past when I show up at a speaking engagement where I do podcasts, because people are always wanting to interact with the inspiration beyond that. So I'm kind of in development process of what that thing is going to be.
I'm glad you brought up a book, because throughout this whole podcast episode, I was like, when is Jenny writing a book? Because there's just and we only scratched the surface. There's so much more that you've accomplished, so many things that you've done, so many stories and experiences that you've had to be able to share that with the world. I can't wait for the book to come out. And of course, we will continue to follow. I will do everything that I can to support you and anything that you're doing and promote it, because you're just doing such great work. And in the show notes for this episode, I will be sure to put all the links to the nonprofit organizations we talked about, EO, Startup, so people can easily follow you, all of your social media links, so people can easily follow you as you continue to roll on. I feel like you're like a bulldozer, bulldozing through the world, Jenny. It's like this visual that I have where you just like, anything gets in your way and you'll just keep going. So it's such an inspiration to me and to so many people that are listening. Jenny, what advice would you give to maybe someone who has an idea, an entrepreneur, somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur, maybe a young person who was just like you, young Jenny, who just had a little idea and failed her way until she finally got something to stick? What advice would you give to somebody out there who has a dream?
Well, first of all, everything is figure outable, you guys. Like literally, you can figure out anything you want. Now you've got amazing resources. You've got YouTube University where you can learn things, or go work for somebody, maybe in that field. What a great way to learn from somebody or learn the business, right? Then always be prepared. Luck favors the prepared. I always say that, right? and then test out your idea, maybe on a smaller scale, take it to a bigger scale, but just don't give up. You're going to have haters and you're going to have non-believers. I promise you this. I promise you this. But you almost have to have the blinders on, right? What I do is I never compete with anybody. I only compete with myself. How can I be better than I was yesterday? What am I doing? I'm always reflecting, I'm analyzing. So just go for it, right? And don't do it for money. That's the biggest thing. If you're only in it for money, not a good vibe. Find something that you're passionate about, something that drives you, because then you're not going to get sick of pursuing it, right? It's harder to give up on something that you're really passionate about and something that you really, truly love.
And there are so many hard days. Anybody who has founded a business or an organization or anything, they can share that there are really difficult moments and difficult days. So if it's something that you're passionate about, it makes it a lot easier to continue to chase that dream and bring it forward. So Jenny, thank you so much for that. Before I let you go, we always end this podcast on 2 questions. So I want to ask you, the first one is, you are a one girl revolution. I'm so grateful to know you and to be able to share your story on this podcast. But who is a one girl revolution in your life? Who is a woman or girl that inspires you?
Definitely my mom. 100%, hands down. She had started her life over again several times, 3 to be exact. Like, imagine with nothing, and going to different places for many different reasons. And I admire her so much for not fearing that, right? Like, she was 45 when she left everything behind and went to a place, didn't know when she's going to get there, how she's going to get there, didn't speak the language. And I just watched her get here, and no matter what, get up every day and just make it happen. So she continues to be my inspiration unequivocally. And just all the working moms out there, they're just juggling this thing called life. They studied the most efficient people in the world. And I mean, they studied Steve Jobs, every CEO you can possibly imagine, the most efficient human being on earth. You ready? Is a mother of 3 children. So shout out to all the moms out there, whether you have 1, 2, 3. It's the struggle is real. I know this firsthand. Like, as I sit here today, I don't have a nanny, she didn't come. I've got 3 kids. I'm doing this very important thing, and you just got to figure it out. And it's life. It's a thing called life, but I promise you can figure it out.
Women are just such beacons of light. And I'm glad you brought that up. Shout out to all the mothers out there, and shout out to your mama, because the women who have laid the path before us, they just continue to be inspirations in our lives. So before I let you go, Jenny, I always end this podcast on 1 question. So I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with 1 message, what would it be?
Just be authentically yourself at all times. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It really, truly does not matter. Like, I really want you to feel it. The reason why I sit here today and I'm successful, because I have an incredible, unchallenged self-belief. I really do. Because my own parents doubted me, and it doesn't get much deeper than that, right? When your own parents are like, why are you always doing this weird things, music, TV? Like, why can't you be like everybody else, right? People will doubt you every single step of the way. It literally does not matter. That's what I'm telling you. The only thing that matters is when you wake up in the morning, you look in a mirror, you're happy with who you are, how are you living your life, and what your purpose is.
Jenny, well, you are such an example of all of that. And I can't wait to continue to follow everything that you're doing. Like I said, I will put all the links in the show notes to everything that you're doing and you on social media so people can easily follow. But Jenny, thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number 1 Girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number 1 girlrevolution.com.